The meeting will come to order. Today is Wednesday, May 3rd, and this is a special meeting of the Cleveland Community Police Commission. We would like to welcome all who are here, as well as any viewers or listeners who might be from our public as well. And we would like to do the roll call. So John Adams.
Present.
Chandra Benito.
Present.
James Chura. Charles Donaldson.
Present.
Kyle Early.
Yes, here.
Alana Garrett Ferguson. Caitlin Kennedy.
Present.
Pete Van Leer.
Present.
Gregory Reeves. Terry Wong.
Present.
Sharina Zayed. Co-Chair Adriana Rodriguez.
Present.
And I am present, Co-Chair Jan Ridgway. So we want to welcome everybody. Also present is the CPC's Executive Director, Jason Goodrich, who was recently sworn in. So congratulations. Dr. Leigh Anderson, who is the Director of the Cleveland Police Accountability Team. And I don't know if Delonte is present, who's with the chief. He's our Chief Ethics Officer, Delonte Spencer Thomas. And we would like to extend a very special thank you to Sarah Anderson, our staff communications person, who has helped to make all of this possible, working with Eaton out of the mayor's office. So we will get started. So the purpose of this meeting, it allows the Cleveland Police Commission to participate in the interview of the candidate for the police inspector general position. It also gives us the opportunity to forward recommendations to the mayor's office as per the consent decree. There will be an opportunity for our public to provide comments through the chat option. While you will not be able to participate orally in this interview, we welcome your comments. We ask that you post them in the chat option, and all comments will be part of what would be considered as we make our recommendations for the selection and the assessment for the selection of this candidate. If you are having trouble posting in the chat option, you may also send your comments through email at info@clevelandohio.gov. I will repeat that. If you have problems with the chat option, you may also send your comments through email at info@clevelandohio.gov. So we want to be able to start by having Dr. Anderson, who will actually introduce the candidate and make a presentation. So thank you, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you, Co-Chair Ridgway. Greetings, commissioners. Greetings, members of the public and others that are attending. I would like to also extend greetings to our candidate who's here, McNamara, welcome. And so we will move forward. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about is the roles of an inspector general. So I understand that this may be new for a lot of people that are listening, a lot of people that are sort of involved in the process. And so what we wanted to do was give a little primer about what the Inspector General role is, sort of the history of the Inspector General function, and how we see this position operating in the city. You're probably wondering, like, Dr. Anderson, Executive Director, Police Accountability Team, why is she giving the presentation on Inspector General? So I'll give a little bit of background. So before I moved into this space, consent decree space, I worked at offices of the Inspector General. So I worked for the DC Office of the Inspector General, also the Chicago Office of the Inspector General in their public safety section. And I teach twice a year at the Association of Inspectors General, teaching new Inspectors General how to look for fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption in government organizations, and also how to look at effectiveness, efficiency, and economy in government organizations and how to execute those. So just a little bit of background about me and how we are pushing this presentation to you all. So are there any questions before I begin?
Okay, we're ready to go.
All right, great. Let me share my screen. All right, so we're going to talk again about the Inspector General function and the City of Cleveland Public Safety Inspector General. So what is Inspector General work? So this encompasses investigations, audits, inspections. They have to follow strict ethics and guidelines. They're independent, and they look for compliance in certain areas within the government. So a little bit of history. So the Office of Inspector General, as we can tell, started back in 1668 in the French infantry and cavalry. So we see this widespread application that starts in Europe, and we don't see it sort of come over into the US until the 1700s. They were specifically concerned with army and militia training, readiness, and use of force. So there are a lot of military organizations that have offices of Inspector General for this reason, right? So they are concerned with training, readiness, how they're using resources, accountability to the generals and such, and also reporting concerns. So expansion of the Inspector General model. So beyond the military, what we see in the 1950s is that the director of the CIA established an OIG along this military model. So we see that being the first sort of civilianized Office of the Inspector General. These functions included inspecting and reporting back to the CIA director. And then we see other civilian federal agencies which follow suit, and then OIGs then spread to the state and local levels. Now, we have an Inspector General Act of 1978, which really governs our work. And so there are established rules and guidelines that basically talk about the qualities of an Inspector General. So they are nonpartisan and independent, okay? They are to provide leadership and coordination and recommend policies for activities that are designed to, you want to promote economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. Okay, and then you also have this ability to prevent and detect fraud and abuse in programs and operations. Inspector Generals also basically keep the head of the establishment and the public fully and currently informed about problems and deficiencies relating to the administration of programs, and they also provide corrective action. So Inspector Generals not only find the problems, but they also provide opportunities for remedies and recommendations to be had. So the IG Act was amended in 2016. And what it does is it grants the authority for IG offices to receive records and materials available to the subject agency. So all individuals, all records are basically open to the Inspector General. They can determine which audits, investigations, inspections, and reviews are necessary. And they also issue appropriate reports with not only the recommendations that were made, but also the issues that they found. And if there are any questions throughout the way, please feel free to stop me. I'll pause here. Are there any questions? Okay, great. So we have the Association of Inspectors General, and this is an organization that was founded out of John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York. And it's a great program. If anybody's interested, they have a master's degree of an Inspector General nature, and it's an inspection and oversight degree. And it is online, so you can move forward with that program. But they birthed out of that organization this Association of Inspectors General. So what is that? So the Association of Inspectors General was organized in October of 1996. And one of the things that it did was, one of the things that it did was it created guidelines and principles for quality standards and best practices that were supposed to be generally applicable to federal, state, and local offices of inspectors general. And so they foster and promote public accountability and integrity in the general areas of the prevention, examination, investigation, audit, and detection and elimination of fraud, waste, and abuse through policy and research analysis. Very wonderful organization. So according to the Association of Inspectors General, inspectors generals at all levels of government are entrusted with fostering and promoting accountability and integrity in government. Okay, so the level of public trust and public expectation embodied in these offices remains exceptionally high for offices of inspectors general. The public expects OIGs to hold government officials accountable for efficient, cost-effective government operations and to prevent, detect, identify, expose, and eliminate fraud, waste, corruption, and legal acts of abuse. So officers of inspector general follow these basic principles of integrity. They're objective, independent, and they have areas that basically set them aside from the agency that they are auditing, evaluating, or reviewing. So offices of inspector general can adopt what the Association of Inspector General has produced, which is the AIG Green Book, and advisory standards, which are recommended. So they have statements of principles, quality standards for offices of inspector general in overall, investigations, inspections, evaluations, and reviews, and also audits. Okay. So the independence of OIGs, according to the AIG Green Book, Principles and Standards, the Inspector General should be free from any personal or external impairments to independence, and they should maintain an independent attitude and appearance. The Inspector General is responsible for establishing and maintaining that independence so that the OIG opinions will be impartial and viewed by others as impartial. This is very important. OIGs really stand on their independence and their objectivity to be able to move forward with executing their audits, evaluations, reviews, and investigations. So major elements of the Inspector General model. Again, they conduct audits, investigations, inspections, and evaluations. They're charged with promoting economy, efficiency, effectiveness, preventing and detecting fraud, waste, and abuse. And they have a broad authority extending to the actions of officials, personnel, contractors, and program beneficiaries. So for example, if someone were to submit an application that was fraudulent to the Inspector General, to a government agency, the Inspector General could, by statute, go after them for submitting any information that wasn't truthful on their application. Just like we have contractors. If you have a contractor that gets city money, they are able to go after those contractors for any fraudulent or misappropriation of funds, et cetera. So the OIG is independent, nonpartisan, and is appointed on the basis of integrity and qualifications. So the same but different. So while similar in function, no two offices of Inspector General are alike, and this is very important. There's a lot of variation among OIGs. So federal civilian OIGs, for example, generally have similar missions and authority, but vary considerably in scope and resources. And then you have military IGs. And then after that, you have even greater variation among state and local IGs. So the scope of responsibility, the specifics of the mandate and their authority, the extent of their independence, and their areas of emphasis. So for example, you can have Medicaid, corrections, or public safety. Those are just some areas that inspector generals look after or oversee. Objectives of executing the IG model. So again, 3 goals: data analysis and collection, hitting the target of the audit, evaluation, or the investigation, and timeliness. Now, we call due professional care or elements of due professional care also using good judgment. So what are Inspector Generals guided by? Coordination, ethics, objectivity, standards of conduct, thoroughness. The work has to be thorough. When an Inspector General puts out a report, they can be late, but they can never afford to be wrong. And so because they have to be independent, they have to be objective, and the sources that they're dealing with, they have to make sure that the information is very succinct, but it's also thorough. So they want to use appropriate techniques, accurate and complete documentation, and again, it has to be timely. So if they're going after a particular audit that they're executing, we want to make sure that that audit comes out in an appropriate time so that we can fix the issues. Getting the work done. So the objectives of this process include Inspector General are to provide a source of factual and analytical information for the public. We want to make sure that they're monitoring compliance, measuring performance, and again, assessing the efficiency and effectiveness of operations. So just a little bit to give you an idea of where offices of Inspector General are throughout the country. This was back in 2020, so we have more Inspector General offices that have popped up, but you see all of the red states are where Inspector Generals are. And again, the darker red has multiple state Inspector General offices. Then you see those with statewide jurisdiction. Okay, and so for example, Florida has statewide jurisdiction. Louisiana has statewide jurisdiction. They have Inspector Generals that report to them based off of the entire state. And they're scattered throughout the state to be able to provide resources to look at, how do I say it, audits, evaluations, and reviews for different sectors of the agencies. And again, this is just, the red is where there are state agencies, and then the blue is where they have statewide jurisdiction, if there are questions. And then I just wanted to give another sort of look at this. So yellow is where you have corrections. So we see public safety and police IGs quickly coming up behind corrections and Medicaid. So Medicaid is also another area where we see Inspector General offices because there's a lot of fraud in those areas. And then these are just the local IGs. And what we tend to see is that most states and cities do not have local IGs. So kudos to Cleveland, even though it came through the consent decree, but kudos to Cleveland for really executing this and making sure that this position is stood up and we can get on the map with this position and looking at promoting economy, efficiency, and effectiveness throughout the city. All right, so the City of Cleveland Public, yes. Is there a question? Okay. City of Cleveland Public Safety Inspector General. So again, I mentioned the consent decrees. So according to paragraphs 250 through 256, it established the role of the Police Inspector General. We have since expanded that role to the Public Safety Inspector General. So it will include police, fire, and other entities that report to the Public Safety Director. Okay, so we're going to hire an individual with significant experience in law enforcement practices and civil rights to serve as Public Safety Inspector General, okay? And again, the city must seek CPC's input in developing minimum qualifications and experience for the IG. Now, this position was posted prior to the new CPC being seated, so I just wanted to make a note of that. The IG will not be a current or former employee of the police department. The budget of the IG must be a separate line item in the city budget and afford sufficient independence of resources to comply with the consent decree. The IG will also have access to all documents and data necessary to perform the above functions, including any raw data. Okay. And the Public Safety Inspector General will be appointed by the mayor into the classified service of the city, which really solidifies their position and maintains their independence. So line of authority, the Public Safety Inspector General will report to the Public Safety Director and give their reports directly to the Public Safety Director. Now, what are their duties? What are we asking them to do specifically? So again, going after the model of an Inspector General, we wanted this position to be able to review policies and practices, determine compliance with state and federal laws, effectiveness, consistency with principles of bias-free and community policing and procedural justice. We want to know whether they promote officer safety and whether they're achieving the goals of the consent decree. They also need to audit compliance with policies and procedures, conduct evaluations, analyze trends, and then develop recommendations concerning these policies and procedures to improve police practices across the board. So the Public Safety Inspector General also analyzes investigations conducted by OPS and determines whether they were timely, complete, thorough, and whether the recommended dispositions are supported by apparatus of evidence. They collect and analyze all sustained findings of discipline imposed. So we'll see them looking at discipline that's imposed and basically look at disciplinary trends to make sure that discipline is applied fairly across the board and consistently across the board. And then they'll make reports and recommendations to reform and make those recommendations publicly available. Now, so how do we choose the candidate? What process did we take? So there were three, for the Public Safety Inspector General, 3 minimum requirements. You had to have a bachelor's degree, a minimum of 5 years of full-time professional experience in law enforcement practices, investigations, and/or civil rights law, and you could not be a current or former employee of the Cleveland Division of Police. Okay, so we rated them on if they met the requirement, if they did not meet the requirement, and if they exceeded the requirement and provided comments. Key steps in the process. So we advertised the position posting. It was advertised until February 16, 2023. We reviewed and screened the applications. We held a first round of interviews, and then we had a presentation of candidates to the CPC. That is obviously what we're doing now. Next, we'll have a second round of interviews to be held, which will then include recommendations from the CPC to the mayor. Okay, and then the candidate will begin. So Cleveland Police Commission's input. So 6 candidates were interviewed in the first round. 3 candidates were slated for a presentation to the CPC. 2 candidates independently removed themselves from the search, okay? So 1 candidate is being presented to the CPC tonight, the second round interviewers, and the mayor for consideration. It's important to note that the understanding is that the CPC will provide comments, pros and cons, and we will give you all a sheet to fill out to the mayor regarding this candidate and if the city should conduct the search again. So those are sort of the 2 options that are here, okay? So thank you. I will stop sharing and I will proceed to see if we have any questions before we question the candidate.
First of all, let's just say thank you very much. It was a very comprehensive presentation. And while we had some of this information in terms of the posting for the position, you definitely made it a little bit more understandable for us.
Okay.
And we were able to, you were able to expand on what we already had in print about the position opening itself. Is this something, the shared screen information, is that something that could be forwarded, a copy of that forwarded? I don't know whether Sarah is capturing that, but I think it would be good for us to have a copy of that within the CPC office.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. And then I just want to take a few seconds to say to those who may have come on after we had made the announcement that according to the Ohio Public Meeting Act, our meetings must be open to the public. We must be transparent. But this interview. This whole process is timed. And so while the public will be able to share comments with us, we will not be able to answer any questions that would be put in chat, but any of your comments and recommendations will definitely be considered as we prepare the assessment of the candidate and also as we prepare our recommendation to share with the mayor's office. So will we get one comment form for the commission or one per commission?
It's one per commissioner.
One per commissioner. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Are there any other questions? Thank you. So would you like to introduce Mr. Muir to the public and to the commission?
I would. Thank you for the
Okay.
opportunity.
Yes.
So we are presenting candidate Mac Muir for the Inspector General role. We are hoping that he can express to you all exactly why I know he can, why he's looking forward to being considered for this position, and looking forward to your questions. So I would like to present the candidate to you all that we have vetted thus far, and are happy to present and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I would just like to remind all of us that this interview is limited to 1 hour. And after Charles Donaldson, Commissioner Charles Donaldson, who heads the hiring committee, takes his position in terms of opening with a couple of general questions, we will make time available for each of the commissioners to ask a question. And the process will allow each commissioner to ask one question of the candidate. And then if we have time after that, we will go around for a second opportunity for each commissioner to ask a question. So we just want to remind the commissioners that we should be careful about using acronyms. We should also be careful about closed-end questions that may elicit a no or yes response. We definitely want the candidate to give us the best and the fullest interview that he can so that we can make a recommendation in his favor. So at this point, Mr. Donaldson, it's yours.
All right, thank you. And thank you for joining us, Mr. Muir. Heads up, I am taking notes and my screen is above me, so I'm not ignoring you. I'm not watching a movie. I might be looking up at times, but I just wanted to start by asking, what are your main reasons for pursuing this role? And then can you also share your vision for the role of Inspector General?
Thank you very much, Commissioner Donaldson. Hello, everyone. I'm Mac Muir. Just as a preface to that, I'm a former supervising investigator with the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board. That's the largest civilian oversight agency in the United States. I handled an investigative team of 5 to 7 investigators at a given time, between 100 and 200 investigations at a given time, and I'm happy to expand on that over the course of this interview. Before that, before my 7 years with the CCRB, I worked as a staffer for Governor John W. Hickenlooper in Colorado, and in close collaboration with the New York City Conflict of Interest Board, continued to work on his presidential campaign, Senate campaign, and so on as an advisor, and have worked as a political advisor on policing policy in an array of fields. Specifically to when it comes to Cleveland. So I did go to Oberlin College, and so I'm familiar with the area. Frankly, I just really like Cleveland. This is a very interesting job in its own right. I think the new formation of the Inspector General role gives it a new opportunity in terms of the impact that it has. And I think what's really exciting to me is this commission, the new creation of this commission and the advisory powers that it has, I think can grow in conjunction with the office. And that gives me a renewed hope for sort of community input in the civilian oversight process. And anytime that happens, I think you can get more robust oversight. And in this case, you have the police, corrections, EMS, fire, and animal control. But I think specifically when it comes to policing, you'll see that's where my area of expertise lies. So I've worked on high-profile cases, complex cases, any version of police misconduct that you can imagine in the United States. given that I worked in all 77 precincts, the NYPD over the course of those 7 years, I think I'm able to show an investigative acumen that will be very useful for you all as we move forward in Cleveland. And so it's both the role and again, the culture, the community. I've got some ties to Cleveland still from folks who I've known over the years. And the former head of the OPS was a member of the CCRB staff. That's Roger Smith. So over time, I did get some familiarity with the older policies. I know that the office has changed naturally, but I think that gives me a level of familiarity, both professionally and personally, that makes this a very appealing job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Do you have other questions that you want to lead with, Commissioner?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. So we will begin the questions from our commissioners. We'll do this in alphabetical order. So we will start with Commissioner John Adams.
Hello, Mr. Muir. Thank you for joining us today for today's meeting. My question for you, I guess, has to do with best practices. So, part of your duties as the Inspector General is to help ensure that the Cleveland police are using best practices. Can you identify some best practices that you would like to see within the CDP and how you plan to ensure that they are being properly and consistently executed?
Thank you very much for the question, Commissioner Adams. I would say, on one hand, I have a lot of ideas when it comes to sort of policing best practices in a broader sense. When I speak to what the Cleveland Police Department should be doing in terms of best practices, I would redirect you to the monitor team to a certain extent, right? The federal monitor has these standards that are already in existence, and I think that it'll be working hand in hand is the first obligation of this Inspector General role. So I think it's going to be a collaboration between the Department of Public Safety, the Monitor's Office. Naturally, there are certain oversight mechanisms that I'm very familiar with. And I think, pardon me for the sirens in the background there, it's the NYPD there. When you look at the best practices, I think it's going to depend on the scope and focus of this office. And so we're looking at crime patterns, criminal investigations. Are we looking specifically at oversight apparatuses and how they should be structured? For me, I think the best practices that I'm going to lean into are those in the OPS and ensuring that there's the highest investigative standard every single time that an investigation happens, that there's clear communication to the public. And I think I bring that as a candidate, someone who's already familiar with Cleveland to a certain extent. I've got experience. I mean, I taught street law. I've worked in a refugee center. I've got a diverse set of skills when it comes to speaking to various communities. And I've also done quite a bit of teaching. So I think it'll be a lot of outreach on that front in terms of once there is a clear goal that we are all agreed upon, it's going to be the focus of this office, we can execute from there. And I know that doesn't get quite to the core of your question, but I hope it suffices.
No, thank you. It's excellent. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Commissioner Benito.
Thank you, Chair Ridgway. Thank you, Mr. Muir. It's wonderful to have you here. I was hoping that you could tell us about a time that you had to push to maintain independence in your authority and practice as someone working in oversight, and what practices were you utilized to maintain independence in this role?
Yeah, so one of the challenges of my professional expertise is that a lot of it happens in areas that are behind closed doors or not subject to public access. I can speak in broad terms about that. I think speaking to a specific incident might be the wrong tack.
Absolutely.
One of the challenges in oversight is when it comes to an individual investigator. I'll just look at it from that perspective because I think you can bring it down to who's the line worker. With an individual investigator, the challenge is you are tasked with figuring out what the preponderance of the evidence is, and you're tasked with using your professional expertise to determine where that line is. For some, it's just what is it likelier than not? Other folks have different percentages. And in fact, if you look at surveys of judges, for example, and their definitions of a preponderance of the evidence, it varies quite widely from judge to judge and state to state and so on. One of the core principles that has to be built into that is once you define what preponderance evidence is, there will be other folks who might have a different standard who are involved in your investigative process and may say, actually, I don't think that that happened, or I wouldn't determine that that happened. And maintaining independence in is collaborative to a certain extent, especially in the oversight field when you have here in Cleveland, all these different bodies that are involved in the oversight process. And I think it's first and foremost, really defining your position on what happened as a fact finder, and then allowing for some input and seeing whether that impacts your logic to a certain extent, and then holding fast to the original logic that you worked with, and making sure that you're not bending your vision based on any outside influence, so that you're really sticking to the facts every single time. I know it's a little broad there because I'm not talking about an individual case, but I can say, one actual substantive thing I can say is that something is a struggle in civilian oversight nationwide is when there are officer-involved shootings. I'd say civilian oversight entities are often pressured to make a conclusion of the facts and say this should be exonerated or substantiated. That's a parlance in New York City. And one of the big challenges from a evidentiary perspective is that there are cases where it's simply unsubstantiated. There isn't a fact that pushes you in one way or the other. Yet for somewhat obvious reasons, it's better for the public to have sort of a definitive answer as to what happened, but sometimes that's where the investigation leads you. And I've certainly faced that before. So perhaps that gives you some insight into my thought process on that front.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So next would be, I don't know, did Commissioner James Chura join us? Okay, so we will go to, we'll give Commissioner Donaldson a chance to ask a question other than the general questions that he started with.
Yeah, I don't have any additional questions at this point. We can go on to the next person.
Okay, all right. Then the next one would be Commissioner Kyle Early.
I have no questions at this time.
Okay. Did Commissioner Garrett Ferguson join us? Okay. The next one would be Commissioner Caitlin Kennedy.
Commissioner Garrett Ferguson is here.
Oh, she is. Okay. Commissioner Garrett Ferguson, do you have a question that you would like to raise at this time?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Caitlin Kennedy.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Muir. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. I'm heartened to see that 3 of the 4 E's of good governance are included in the Inspector General's job description, so to speak: efficiency, effectiveness, economy, and the 4th being equity. What do you think these principles mean to Clevelanders? And what do you think our community wants to see out of our government that perhaps we haven't seen in the past?
Thank you, Commissioner. That's a fantastic question. And it sort of speaks to the heart of the value of civilian oversight of law enforcement and the role of an Inspector General. I guess I'll start with your last E there, which is equity. One of the extraordinary roles of Inspectors General is the ability to have wide-ranging sort of practice and policy investigations that go into whether or not there is any inequitable treatment in a system and diagnose the reasons that exists. And I think that's a big draw for me. And that's a draw for the reason this position exists to a certain extent. That's the reason the federal monitor's here to a certain extent. And that's the reason I suspect all you are here, is that anytime that there is the even perceived inequity within our criminal justice system, and we know those inequities do exist, it's the role of government to be able to fix that to whatever extent possible. And an independent Inspector General, as this role, gives us the opportunity to figure out where those inequities exist and diagnose them, as I said before. When it comes to efficiency and effectiveness, I think for me, I mean, that's at the core of investigations. Any professional investigator, particularly in this field where usually you're underfunded, and overworked. You understand that time is precious and money is precious. And I certainly take that to heart. And as a public servant, I think that I can bring that particular skill set as you speak to my references or whoever else you like, and I can speak to the details of that process at the CCRB, but making sure that you're doing the best work as quickly as possible because the stakes are really, really high in this profession. You have folks who are waiting on investigative work. You have got a public who's waiting for answers as to why any of these public safety entities are behaving the way they are and whether there are changes that need to be made. And I take the full weight of that on my shoulders in this particular role. And then particularly with economy, I mean, this is I think a 1.5 person staff. You've got an admin person for the inspector general role here. And all I can say to that extent is I dedicate all my time to this job to whatever extent the law allows to ensure that I can make the city as safe as possible. And I do view this through that lens. This is a collaborative as it is within the Department of Public Safety, but even speaking to a civilian oversight entity such as yourselves, this is all collaborative effort to improve public safety at every moment. So I hope that answers your question, and I'm happy to take any follow-up on that front.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pete Van Leer.
Thank you, Mr. Muir. Given the role, I mean, we've just heard, and I've been reading about the role of the IG as it relates to policies and practices, in the police department, discipline and investigations. And these are also areas that fall under the duties of the commission as well. We have a role in there. It's laid out in section 115.5. So I'd like to ask you specifically how you would see yourself working with the Community Police Commission on those specific issues.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I appreciate that question. And I'm thrilled with the opportunity to work with the commission as it's growing here. I have some precedent doing that. I was a subject matter expert for the Oakland Police Commission and helped them draft patrol guide procedures for the Oakland Police Department. It's a relatively similar structured oversight commission with broad powers and advisory in there. It's a sort of final disciplinary authority. They're able to hire and fire the police chief as well, which creates a different dynamic, but also advising them and having a back and forth and clear communication, I think has set a good precedent for me of understanding the value of community input and also making sure that as we're all learning how to do our various roles, that we can learn together and that you can have an open invitation to provide input at any given time. Now, there'll be I'm certain some official approaches to how that's handled, but I think that beyond that, it's important to have a good rapport with you all being really the voices of the Cleveland community. So the way I'd be approaching this particular job is with a lot of outreach. I know that's part of the monitors checkboxes is ensuring that there's outreach that explains the role of the inspector general. And my hope would be that this could be done in tandem to some extent. I could perhaps make presentations to the commission and that we could all, again, have a clear line of communication going forward.
Thank you.
Next would be Commissioner Gregory Reeves. Has he joined us? I'm not sure. No? Okay. So Commissioner Rodriguez, Commissioner Chair Rodriguez, questions?
Thank you. So the specific role is to develop policies, procedures, and practices, training. Do you have any specific examples that you would like to share that you have implemented within your professional career?
So specific policies and procedures, and I'll think to one that's maybe a good example.
You don't have to do all of them, just maybe a few.
Yeah. So the I think interesting thing about being at the CCRB is, right, it's an investigative agency of almost 200 people. And so I worked really closely with our policy unit as an investigator and as a supervisor, trying to relay information back as quickly as possible to our policy unit to output policy. So we would take the statistics from the investigations and then put those into annual reports. And the CCRB is a treasure trove for police oversight statistics nationally. And part of that is in the investigative process, you find like blips on the radar that are useful data points that ultimately lead to broader policies. But it's one investigation at a time. You begin to see patterns. You begin to see what data points are most useful and what policies are particularly useful. When I think to a specific policy, because I wasn't in the unit itself, but I sat down with them quite regularly. Some of it would come down to like timeliness of investigations. We talk about what's a reasonable time frame for an investigator to complete X or Y task within the process of an investigation. And then more broadly, I would say that, speaking of, maybe this is more of an insight as to how I approached the work in this investigative agency, was I did create an entity that we called Monthly Case Workshop. And I think it might be actually a useful reference point for the commission here, is that we would take our investigative work and we would have investigative staff give presentations to each other on how they thought about the cases and then look for trends in the work that we were doing, because investigators tend to work in silos. The idea is we were able to sort of democratize the process of sharing cases to a certain extent, and also by hearing different people talk about how they thought about their cases, the resources they were using, I think we were able to make sure that folks who had just started on the job were accelerated in this pace that they learned how a real tenured investigator thought about their work. And so that was institutionalized at the CCRB. And I think that it had a real impact, not on people staying for a longer period of time, but just on the quality of the work going forward. And there were a couple examples of that where I tried to create spaces where you could establish policy. Another one of those is I was one of the founding folks who started the Committee for Agency Practices, I believe is what it's called, CAP. And that's a part of the agency where all the investigators would get together about once a month, and they would propose policy to the executive director. So they would sit down, they'd vote on what the best ideas were, and it was a way to sort of filter internal policy so that we could make our investigations higher quality. And then also when there were trends, we could bring those to the attention of the director as appropriate. Thank you.
Commissioner Terry Wong.
Thank you, Co-Chair Ridgway. Hi, Mr. Mayor, how are you? Thank you for joining us. I'm sorry, I'm just calling up my questions so I can read to you. I imagine that, I understand that you worked as, I just wanted to clarify that you worked as an investigator for most of your career with the New York Police Department. But this is a much more kind of analytical role, the Inspector General. So I just wanted to ask you how, so a lot of your job has to involve developing and using statistical metrics. Have you done this in any other previous work? And how did you create these metrics? Which metrics in your experience dealing with police work are the most useful? And what of these metrics are not being measured by Cleveland CPT today?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I am well, Commissioner. Thank you. So, first of all, I just wanted a point of clarification there. The Civilian Complaint Review Board is not within the NYPD in any way. It's an independent entity. So we have 3 appointees to our board, but it is separate. It's budgeted separately, and that we don't work with the NYPD in the formal capacity that a civilian oversight agency would if it were within it. To your point, so it's true. If you look at my cover letter there in my investigative experience, it's pretty straightforward in terms of investigations. However, the policy units work very closely with investigations at the CCRB. So we are setting metrics for the investigative processes, which I think is useful for the OPS in particular. All right, I'm very familiar with how to set internal metrics for an investigative agency. When you're speaking about externally, what are metrics for how to evaluate a police department? I think I can speak maybe a little more to my political and policy experience, because I've been directly advising folks as they go through their campaigns on how to not only talk about policing, but the research that might be most useful to them. So That's an area where I would say I know quite a bit, and I am able to refer to various studies as to how this data is collected. I didn't do it in a professional capacity at the CCRB. However, for example, with an audit, I'm very familiar with that process through NACOL, and I am a member of NACOL. I'm on the communications committee for NACOL. For those who don't know, that's the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. I'm on the communications committee, the investigations working group, the stakeholders working group, and that's for community outreach, and then also the policy working group, which specifically goes to the question that you're asking there, Commissioner. In those groups, we tend to workshop metrics for civilian oversight agencies nationwide. So say someone from another city comparable in size to Cleveland might come as a policy expert and say, hey, we want to set metrics for how to look for disparities in stops, racial disparities in stops. And we'll go through studies. A good example is the Stanford Policing Project did the study in Nashville to prove to the department that they were stopping more Black folks than white folks proportionally, and then implement those changes. So we'd go get those studies, have a conversation with the policy folks, and then provide some advice as to how to proceed. And that is within the professional capacity at NACOL, and it blends together. Anytime you're doing this investigative work on a supervisory level, you are flagging trends. And in terms of the data analytics itself, and so I can say setting the metrics is one thing. To actually set the metrics, gather the data over time, that's going to be more a collaboration with the Department of Public Safety, because I've been the one creating the data a lot of the time, as opposed to the one who's taking it in. Again, I understand the process. I can't tell you how much I've read on the subject, but it'll have to be in collaboration with the monitoring team as well, because their expertise does lie in gathering data.
Sorry, I just wanted to follow up because I feel that, thank you for answering that, but I felt it diverged a little bit from maybe the expressed intent in my question.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm asking is, if you have knowledge of developing metrics, the metrics, are not just race, class, and things that may show disparity, but what are the important metrics you would say, as an investigator, if you can think, I know that you're dealing with individual cases, but they're obviously, I imagine the same metrics that we would use for statistical analysis would be the same ones that you would take as information or as evidence in a particular case. So I just it would be very helpful to me to see you walk through how you would test for racial disparity, test for class disparity, test for these things, and if you have any previous experience doing that. Because I think, you will be working in collaboration, but this to me, my understanding is this role is highly analytical, highly quantitative. And it would be good that you have some kind of, I understand that you were working in a slightly different capacity, but an ability to learn how to develop these statistical and analytical methods, if that's clear to you. So if you could just be more clear as to not the relationships, but how you would set up determining whether something is awry, determining whether there is a disparity, and if you're aware of any metrics that are not being used by Cleveland that would help reveal certain truths about policing, please provide them. Thank you.
And when you're thank you, Commissioner. If I could just get a point of clarification, when you're talking about metrics, are you talking about metrics to do an audit on, or a specific type of audit? Because as an investigator, I think there's really two ways to think of the metrics when I hear that word, which is whether you're thinking about metrics because a big part of this role is making sure that OPS's work is done in the best fashion possible. And so the metrics for how you quantify, say, the oversight apparatus is going to be a lot different from how you quantify metrics for the department itself. So there's sort of an internal and external facing component to this. And if I could just get some clarification on that front.
Yeah, I think with OPS, I think you obviously have very kind of parallel experience and overlapping experience with the Civilian Police Review Board. Or I apologize if that's not real name in New York, but I am actually looking for how you will study whether certain policies in Cleveland of the police through a statistical analysis, how you will be able to determine what needs to be changed or if existing policy is doing what it's intended, and to uncover potential things that other people have asked for. Are there disproportionate impact on certain population groups? So, I mean, I'm asking for, to me, I would probably gather things like, the number of arrests, who is being arrested, where are they being arrested, like kind of identity type of information, because you're trying to just get your job, I suppose, is to get information for what is happening all over Cleveland, right? So I don't know if I'm making myself clear, because I think I would just like to see like either a willingness to learn in this regard, or a recognition that there is a set of skills that is necessary in order to analyze the problems that Cleveland may be facing.
Yeah, so I again, thank you, Commissioner. When it comes to metrics, I guess I would want a little more guidance as to what specific metrics you're trying to measure, right? If we're looking at racial disparities, for example, it would be a matter of whether you're looking for them in arrests or stops or vehicle pursuits and so on, and then you'd be doing an analysis of which officers have been. Let's take. Are you hoping to have me just walk through my thought process on how I would approach that? Or because I think it usually, there's no broad way to do a statistical analysis. You have to have the specific thing you want to analyze sort of set in stone beforehand.
Yes, if you could walk me, and I don't mean to belabor this point, but if you could walk me through the process, and we have to be careful that if we have a hypothesis, right, it could, we have to be careful of how we say you have a hypothesis that there is racial disparity in how Cleveland police treats the citizens. That's a hypothesis, but you have to develop quality, objective, unbiased metrics, because certainly you can't develop metrics that just prove that result, right? You have to look at a much more foundational metrics, like here are the arrests, here's the use of force for everybody. So I just, I'm just interested if you had ability and previous experience in developing something like this, or are you usually taking metrics and kind of statistical methods given to you and applying them? Have you ever had, maybe that's a better question, have you ever had any experience building the methodology from scratch, and are you able to rebuild a faulty statistical methodology?
So I have never built one of these methodologies from scratch. I would say that in civilian oversight, the foundation is built pretty much anytime you attack one of these issues, right? The Stanford Policing Project being a great example, where if you look at disparities in policing, there are hundreds of variables that you want to consider when you're doing an analysis of whether or not there's disparate use of force, for example. And so those metrics are generally built in. And then for Cleveland itself, you would say, all right, what are the basic 100 things that we need to hold as variables here? And then what's unique about Cleveland that needs to go into that study as well. But ultimately, I think maybe what you're trying to get at, or at least I can clarify, I'm not a PhD. I don't do sort of broad statistical analyses in that way. So I would be leaning on the monitoring team to a certain extent. But the rules of civilian oversight sort of when it comes to studying disparate impact, I think have already been written to a certain extent. And it's a matter of an oversight entity going to the experts, going to the monitoring team, and pardon me for the inspector general here, going to the monitoring team, going to the experts and saying, how are we going to build this out collaboratively? Because I don't think if you're going to have somebody who has the ability to build out an entire study from scratch, I think that you're going to have them limited in other areas. And frankly, building one of these studies from scratch it isn't particularly necessary. I think as far as I understand, there's a lot of times where the variables have already been pulled and you need to input the data. And my understanding is that that's what this role is here for, is that the data exists a lot of the time and it hasn't been input through these types of studies.
Thank you. I think that we can move on to another question, and maybe I can follow up offline for more information if I need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the point of clarification there.
Okay, so we are actually, did Commissioner Sharina Zayed come in? Okay, it's her turn.
Co-Chair. Hi, so I do have a question for you. I first want to say thank you for being here with us today. So the ultimate mission of the public safety inspector goes beyond compliance and analysis and just making reports. It is also to put in an effort for change where it is needed within the Cleveland Division of Police. Can you please tell us your knowledge of organizational dynamics and tell us what you believe makes you capable of shifting policy, behavior, and culture within CPD?
Thank you, Commissioner. I really appreciate that. So to that point, I guess I'd start by saying I did train, I'm not a lawyer, but I did train at Columbia Law School in mediation, the New York Peace Institute. I am a professional mediator. And I think that speaks to how I approach problem solving and building consensus. If you look at building culture, and I just want to make sure I'm getting to the right point of the question. You're talking about building culture and building change in the organization, is that correct?
Yes.
So I think it's one thing to diagnose where there are cultural issues and another thing to implement those cultural changes. I think the idea behind this role is to diagnose and then push for people to be aware of the diagnosis, and that it's not necessarily at every turn going to be the responsibility of the Inspector General to implement the change, but to say, here's a proposal for what needs to change. I'm a professional, I'm seeing these issues, and go from there. And I think that that'll be a collaboration with the commission going forward, is figuring out what are your priorities, what's the Department of Public Safety's priorities, and how can we pick which issues need to be changed most quickly. And I think that ultimately lies with the monitor, as though compliance with the monitor team is, to my understanding, goal number one. When you talk about, for me, if I could say that I've changed policing culture, I don't think I could measure it. I'd like to think that I've had an impact on individual officers to a certain extent. For me, building culture, my experiences with building culture inside an oversight entity. And I spoke to that a little bit before about having spaces where investigators could propose policy and discuss their cases. And I know that there's no investigative staff for the Inspector General here, but I do think that that's the attitude that I bring toward this work, is enthusiasm. I mean, I love police oversight. I love doing investigations. I love learning more and more about this field, and because it's growing every day, there's new information every day. And I'd like to think that my enthusiasm is infectious, and that my investigative experience is in the quality of my work is good enough that I get the respect of law enforcement in this process. And I think that's a major part of having this particular role, is saying, well, if you're going to have somebody who's going to do oversight, any studies into the department, oversight of OPS, you want to make sure that the investigative quality is so high that everyone involved who has investigative experience respects it. And I think that builds trust in the opportunity to build culture at the same time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you can take a quick breath. We have completed the first 30 minutes, and we will, I think everybody who had an opportunity, who wanted an opportunity to ask a question during this first 30 minutes, you've done that. And now we will begin with another round. So those of you who have already asked a question, this is an opportunity for you to ask a second question. If you did not before, it's an opportunity for you to ask your first question. And this will keep us within the 1 hour time limit that we have for the interview. So we'll start again with Commissioner John Adams.
Thank you, Co-Chair Ridgway. My second question is another one of your duties as IG is to ensure that policing in Cleveland is bias-free. What does that mean to you, and what are your thoughts on the relationship between bias-free policing and cultural competence?
Can you say the last part of that question? I want to make sure I answer it correctly. You said the distinction between bias-free policing and cultural competence?
I'm sorry, my mic was a little low. So it's about bias-free policing. I guess my question is, what are your thoughts on the relationship between bias-free policing and cultural competence?
So that's a great question. It's a big question, and thank you, Commissioner. I really appreciate it. My thoughts on bias-free policing. The challenge with all of this when it comes to discrepancies in policing, you see Black people are over-policed in proportionally in a lot of parts of the US. And I think that as you approach it, as you said, there's the cultural competence aspect of it. First and foremost for this office, it's going to be addressing the actual statistical disparities, right? Are there groups of officers who are engaging in more of a disparity? Is there, and I'd like to compartmentalize, to try to approach this from a compartmentalized fashion, if that's my delegated role. I think that the challenge becomes when you view disparities and you try to change the broader policies that may have created those disparities. Is it changing sort of the hearts and minds of the officers themselves, or are you changing policy at a high level and then hoping that it trickles down over time? My understanding is that this role wouldn't be in charge of the cultural competency there. Apologies if I'm mistaken, but that is my understanding. And that they're two really distinct, they're two distinct ideas. But when it comes to identifying racial disparities in any disparities that take place in the police department, I think right now in this stage of oversight, in the stage of the research around disparities in policing, the best you can do is figure out where they exist statistically, and then go back to the initial policies, try to diagnose specifically what is creating those incentives, present them to the Department of Public Safety and the department itself, and go from there. And I think that'll be a collaboration with the monitoring team. When it comes to cultural competency, I think that's a conversation that happens after you identify those statistical obstacles.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Benito.
Thank you. Good to see you again. So I might butcher some of these statistics a little bit, but we have, as we have been getting onboarded as a commission, we have heard from some folks who are connected to OPS and also our Civilian Police Review Board. And some of the things that I believe I heard, I'd have to double check my notes for accuracy, so please forgive me, but I know that the CPRB has, I think, at least 60 cases that have already been completed and are waiting to by OPS and are waiting to be reviewed by the CPRB, and that some of the OPS investigations from the time that a complaint has been filed to the time that the investigation complete is, sometimes taking a year or even more, and there's a large backlog in OPS as well, which, I think that does a real disservice to our citizens who are making these complaints, because once you get that far out, it's a lot harder to do a quality investigation. And I think people lose faith in the system of oversight. So Mike, I know that there's, there's things that you won't know until you're in until somebody's in the department and is seeing what's happening. But what ideas do you have of, how you would potentially tackle those problems?
Thank you very much for your question. I have a lot of ideas as to how to attack backlogs in New York City. When after George Floyd was murdered, we received more complaints than I believe any oversight entity in the United States has ever received in a 3-day period, by quite a big margin. We had cases take years to complete. These are extraordinarily complicated cases with thousands of people marching, and you would have individual cases with tens or dozens of officers and many more civilians. And then needing to triage those is part of civilian oversight. You find their backlogs when there are personnel changes or for whatever reason, and maybe there's just mass incidents. In terms of addressing the backlog, I mean, in the short term, I wouldn't want to step on the head of the OPS's toes because I think that would be a collaborative process in identifying investigative techniques that might be useful. And I wouldn't also want to tell the investigators what to do without having been on site and really understand their workflow, because until you hear an investigator explain what their frustrations are with the process, I don't think you can speak credibly about what the issues are. I will say one technology that I'm very excited about is a technology, I believe it's called Trulio. It's an AI technology that reviews body cam. And the Aurora, Colorado Police Department has started using this. There are a few others, I believe Anaheim, California has as well. And it's right on the precipice of being accurate enough to be useful for civilian oversight entities. I've just reached out actually yesterday to their CEO, hoping to have some more conversations. And I know that folks on the NACOL board have been having conversations with them. That's an opportunity for civilian oversight where I think that you could have 25, 40% of the body cam being reviewed by AI. In the United States, less than 1% of body cam is reviewed at all. And this gives the opportunity for us to save a lot of time and energy in the investigative process, and then being able to flag certain issues. And that's what this AI technology is able to say with, right now it's 90% accuracy. Going to be issues with that over time, but it can flag discourtesy, force, car stops, et cetera, et cetera. So that speaks to how I'm thinking about it. I'm talking to oversight leaders every day, trying to figure out how you can get those caseloads down. And that will be a collaborative process with everyone involved here to ensure that the quality of the investigations don't go down, because that's the push and pull with any civilian oversight apparatus, is if you say we got to close those cases quickly, your preponderance gets weird, and suddenly you have appeals processes that end up taking more time than anyone expected in the first place. So it's push and pull, but I'd hope to be as useful as possible on that front.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Donaldson.
I do not have any additional questions at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Kyle Early.
I have no questions at this time.
Commissioner Garrett Ferguson. Commissioner Caitlin Kennedy.
No questions for me.
Commissioner Van Leer.
Thank you, Co-Chair. So you've been in a lot of different communities around the country, different parts of the country, New York, Oakland, Colorado, and looked at policing in different areas. And so I'm wondering a couple of things, like what are some of the things you've seen in common in some of these areas, and what do you think about unique challenges you might see in Cleveland that you haven't seen elsewhere, or maybe they're all the same? And also, I have a sort of a second part of that question is, I know it doesn't take much Googling to see that you've been looking for jobs in different places. And I'm just wondering right now, I know you're in the running in Boise, and I'm just wondering what about Cleveland, or like what draws you here? What would weigh in favor of taking a job here versus someplace like Boise? Very different cities and dynamics, right? So I guess it's a two-part question about the problems you see in different places, but also what would, most interest you and most draw you to work here?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Commissioner. The first part of the question is, I could go on that for the rest of this, our time period here. I think that every police department has unique issues. Absolutely. I think those are reflective of when the department was founded, the culture that defined it, and what outside factors have shaped it over time. And I think that every city in the US has a different story as to what that is, and it's reflective of the community, and every community is unique in its own way. With that said, all right, we can see that there are broader issues. You have these disparities take place in a lot of different cities, and they manifest in different ways. If you're asking if there a specific commonality, I think it would be a leap to say something that there are ties, and you have different stories. You have, it's the story of unions in a given city reshapes what the story of policing is. And right, you see there are many states also where the police unions aren't allowed at all. And so you have totally different dynamic in Georgia, where you have a police foundation that shapes a lot of the local police department policies in Atlanta. And yeah, I don't know if I can say anything that this is how I think about it, is broad and local at the same time. Maybe, is there anything more you want to ask specifically in that part of the question?
Yeah, I guess to some degree, is like, what do you see about Cleveland that there might be something very specific to Cleveland? What do you know about Cleveland that just says, well, this could be an issue here, even though I know you're not here, so it might be hard for you to say, but given what you know, what do you see as one or two of the issues that might be more, I mean, not more unique, but more really specific to Cleveland?
Well, in Cleveland, you have a really large Black community, and you have a federal monitor. And
right,
right, I did listen to the Serial season 3 in the courthouse, and beyond that, I mean, here's what I ask in these interviews generally, and I know this is right now directed at me, but if I were asking you or a member of the department, I mean, for me, I want to know who the officers are, and ask that in broad terms. I want to know where they hang out and what the pulse is. And I don't know that in Cleveland. I mean, I've spent time there. I could guess, but I think I would want to know and meet them and listen to their interviews and try to get a better sense of what the story is. So for me, it's like there's the story that's on Serial or that's in the Federal Monitor reports, but I don't think that's really the story of who the officers are and what shapes them in a way that anyone from the outside can diagnose until you've been there for a little while. So I would rely on you, the community, to advise me on that. And I would certainly lean in to the department and ask questions about what shapes the culture from the perspective of the department itself, because I don't think anybody on the outside can ever really diagnose that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's helpful. And the second part was like, okay, Cleveland, Boise, very different. Why, what are the factors that weigh that decision if you're offered 2 jobs?
Yeah, so I think it would probably be inappropriate for me to speak to that in a way that didn't put anybody down. I'm very excited about the Cleveland opportunity. I've lived in the Cleveland area before, and I can say I very much hope that I get an offer regarding this position. And just out of respect for Boise, I don't think I want to comment other than that. It's a great city, and I have interviewed with their mayor and all, but I think it'd probably be a healthier thing for me to focus on Cleveland here and say that I'm really excited, and I hope that I get that offer.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I thought I hit that unmute button. Commissioner Rodriguez. You're on mute.
Okay, yes.
Thank
Stop,
you.
unmuted. So the current description has that it's split through various departments such as police, fire, and EMS, et cetera. How do you anticipate prioritizing the different responsibilities and initiatives within this role?
Thank you. I appreciate that question. My understanding is that the focus of this role is going to be on police, and that's why I'm here now. So in terms of prioritization, I know how to do an investigation really well. I don't know much about fire misconduct. And I don't think there are a lot of experts on that front. There are not a lot of inspector generals that handle this, and it's going to be a learning experience. And I'm excited to learn. I got an open mind, but the focus of this, the OPS, case backlog, all of that, right? The infrastructure already exists around policing. The federal monitor's here because of policing. And my number one goal would be to help the city of Cleveland get out of the federal consent decree. So I think the rest is we're all going to learn at the same time what those other obligations are, because no inspector general the city of Cleveland has handled that responsibility before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question comes from Commissioner Wong.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Ridgway, sorry. Mr. Mayor, I want to again focus a little bit on your skills. I would like you to describe the types of reports you've written in your capacity. I realize it was a slightly different capacity as an investigator, kind of the level of detail that was required, the length perhaps, and how much effort you had to put into these reports. And the second part of my question is, have you read the reports of Mr. Violent, who served previously in the same role? And if you have, what noteworthy insight or policy changes from his reports do you think should be applied? As you mentioned before, that you give a lot of recommendations, but if there's something that he has already addressed, what should be applied? And what specific aspects of his reports would you like to change or make better?
Okay, so before you answer that, that's 3 or 4 questions. We only have about 6 minutes left to this interview. We want to stay on track with the time. So I'm going to ask you to choose the one question that's most important. We do want to give Commissioner Zaid the last opportunity, and I would like to ask a final question as well. So if you would be willing to choose the most important question out of the ones that you have raised, I think it would be appreciated. Thank you.
I do think Commissioner Zaid has already left the meeting. So if it's possible, if he could answer, basically I want to know about his writing experience and if he reports, and has he read the reports of Mr. Violent? And what does he think about them?
So to begin with my writing experience, when you ask how much writing I've done so much that my head hurts. And at the CCRB, the way at the end, let's imagine you're at the end of a case so you can get how much writing there is. In the course of an individual investigation, you are going to write summaries of all the body cam. You're going to do transcriptions of personal transcriptions of all the interviews. And then you're going to write a report. You're going to get about 1,000-page case file for a big case, sometimes up to 2,000 plus in the real big ones. And then you're going to write a report that ranges. The investigative reports of the CCRB, to my understanding, are longer than in Cleveland as it stands. And I would say to that, not to really compare and contrast, because the information in a report is only as good as what its purpose is. So we have a lot of information in our investigative reports that are available online. Some of the ones that I've written are available online. If you just type in Mac Muir CCRB on Google, it'll probably, some of those closing reports probably show up. So for my longer ones, 40 pages of detailed analysis of every fact in the case, detailed analysis of the testimony, detailed analysis of the law. So we would do our own legal research and then sort of verify it with the legal team at the CCRB. But the baseline expectation was that you knew all federal case law pertinent to policing. We've got some Ohio law that actually covers that. And the job's very, very, very writing heavy. So describing incidents in very clear, plain language, the facts, and then the reasons that an investigative determination has been made. Perhaps sometimes to the point where it's too much information. So I think there's opportunities to keep it short, but stylistically, I think that it's a matter of what you're trying to get done at the end zone that really matters for how a given report is put together. I can't speak. I have certainly reviewed every public document I can regarding the IG's office and Violence reports. I can't speak to a specific recommendation and whether or not I agree with it, but that's something where we would certainly begin with what business is already needs attending to and deciding whether to proceed with those particular recommendations.
Okay, so we just got some information that Commissioner Zaid has not left. She is here. So we have a few minutes left. So it's your opportunity, Commissioner Zaid.
Okay, thank you. So as stated before, Cleveland does have very unique challenges and issues. We are in a consent decree. So I just wanted to know, how do you plan to engage with community in your role, and get community input on your role? And also, how have you been working to prepare yourself for this role? And are there any skills that you feel you need to learn or tweak to prepare yourself for this role?
Thank you very much. In terms of community outreach, I mean, a responsibility of this job is going to be going out and getting feedback early and often. How do I expect to do that? I expect to spend my nights and weekends going to community events where I can talk to people about policing and ask for their feedback. One specific thing that I think is lacking in civilian oversight overall is having a very clear survey system. I would probably recommend that to the OPS, is that there's a survey for the folks who are involved in any investigative process, and gather that information and uses that information to improve policies over time, to improve ideally satisfaction with all these processes. And I think that, frankly, just having surveys at the end of any bureaucratic process you go through is a very humanizing and form of accountability, of saying it's okay. I mean, the hard part about surveys is that you get bad feedback, and there needs to be a system where it's okay to get bad feedback, because that's the only way to improve. When it comes to experience, I don't have, I mean, these kind of go hand in hand with the outreach. This job is going to demand me speaking to the community members and stakeholders all the time and figuring out what's going on the ground at present and being up to date to present very frequently. So I don't have that, but that would be the heart of the job, as far as I can understand, is having a clear analysis and being an expert in the Cleveland Police Department as quickly as possible, and then refining that expertise every single day and having it be up to date. Beyond that, frankly, commissioners here, I would lean on to figure out where were the obvious places to go to talk to folks about policing and get that feedback that I need to do a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are right at 7 o'clock. So I will not ask my question, but I will say this, because I do want to keep us on task, and we have a couple of other things on this agenda to accomplish in our relationship to this interview. I do want to say thank you. You have given us a very thorough interview. We will couple that with your resume, and I guess I would like to just leave maybe 1 or 2 minutes open right now to see if you have any questions of us as commissioners.
Thank you for that opportunity, Commissioner. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all your time with this process. I understand that picking somebody to run any aspect of a civilian oversight process is one of the most challenging aspects of government as I've seen it. It's a tough position to fill, this particular one, and oversight roles in general. I've gone through your website and looked at a lot of sort of the policies you're advocating for as a commission. If I could just hear in short, perhaps from you, Commissioner, but from anyone, what are your hopes for this specific role, and how can I help bridge that gap?
Do we have anyone who would like to respond to that?
Commissioner Ridgway, if I can respond. Thank you so much for being here with us. And I know that we gave you some questions that were not typical of many interview sessions, but it speaks to the importance of your role. I realize that, part of the struggle that I think, just from my perspective as a commissioner, is the bridge and gap between the community's understanding and the police's understanding. And that is why I think it's so essential for kind of, like a referee role, that you would take all of the information, all of the individual information, which is basically what you're doing statistically, and seeing if there are trends, and developing really robust and metrics that people can trust. So I just wanted to say that, like, if you can look to your role as you have, in the past as a mediator, but for two entities that are right now, not just two people, but two groups of people. So I would hope that whatever you may not have right now in kind of statistical knowledge and in developing variables, I would encourage you to try to develop them independently, in addition to relying on subject matter experts, because since you have a fresh set of eyes on this, it would be wondrous if you can come up with new solutions and new ways, and find things that people that have been in this field for long may not be able to see. So I really hope that you go forward with curiosity and courage, and believe that not just telling the system what is wrong, but maybe that we can all work together to change it a little bit for the better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I really appreciate that.
Is there another voice that also would like to respond?
Sure. So thank you for taking the time to interview with the Cleveland Community Police Commission for the Public Safety Inspector General position, which has an enormous role in constitutional policing within the city. It is my hope that if you're selected for the position, may you charge with tenacity, steadfastness, and conviction in creating a safer Cleveland. We look forward in working with you, and any opportunity for creating policies that are fair and unbiased. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think I would have take the last word, and I would say that I think you need to put your Superman cape on. I think you would need to bring a little bit of Huck to this position. I think you probably have a good understanding, and if not, you would gain it really fast, of the issues that we're facing here in the city of Cleveland. I think that you have indicated a strong commitment to community engagement and interacting with the people that we report to. We report to the citizens of Cleveland. They provide the oversight for the work that we do, and we provide it for the police department. And I think you are very right in that all this work is collaborative, and that we move forward only by working together, understanding the roles, and also understanding how we can help each other in instituting constitutional police reform, with a huge focus on our citizens and their input. So we thank you very much for interviewing with us, and for the information that you have shared with us. And we wish you all the best in this interview process. And we will be sharing our comments really soon. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. All your comments are very moving. And thank you all for your hard work. You're the engine that keeps us moving.
Thank you. So at this point, I am going to make one comment, and then I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair to move us toward the completion of this process. So I know that Dr. Anderson mentioned that a survey or an assessment tool would be distributed to each commissioner for response input that will go to the mayor. What we are asking is that your comment sheets go to Commissioner Donaldson and the hiring committee. And he will collate all of this along with the comments coming from the public chat option and present everything together as one package to the city. I think we're stronger collectively and with our feedback, being in one place. So make sure that when these forms are received, that we take the time to think thoughtfully about our comments, what we have gathered from the interview. We definitely will be doing that from those in the community who have shared their input in the chat option. And remember also that you can also send your comments to us through email using info @clevelandohio.gov. We need your recommendations, your comments, and I want you to know that whatever you send to us will be part of what we will include in our recommendations to the mayor's office. So that's why it's important to have the commissioner's comments, but also the comments from the public in one document that will be moving forward. So I want to thank each of you for the time and the energy and the thought that you put into making this process work. So co-chair, Commissioner Rodriguez.
Thank you so much. So as we, the next portion of the meeting will be Chief Spencer Delonte Thomas outlining the next steps in the selection process.
So good evening. Thank you to the commission for pulling together and hosting this special meeting to our candidate for the public safety IG position. So just as an FYI to everyone, just kind of where we are in the process. And so the first round of interviews have already taken place. And at this point, the candidates will go forward for a final round of interviews that will be conducted by the public safety director, the law director, as well as our police accountability team executive director. So the three of them, Dr. Anderson, Director Griffin, and Director Howard, will interview the candidates, and then and also giving feedback to the mayor as well, along with what is received from the commission. The mayor will weigh in, and ultimately it'll be Chief Director Howard who initiates the final decision here based on all the feedback. And so the hope is to be able to move through this relatively quickly. And so you might have, if you have checked your emails, you have already received the evaluation form that Dr. Anderson has created. So, and based on what Commissioner Ridgway just mentioned, so however you guys want to compile that information, I think is fine. So we just essentially looking for that as soon as you can, so that we can move forward with the next steps of the process. And so again, we're looking to move this through relatively quickly and move forward. So again, I just want to thank you all for answering the call once again with another putting another meeting on you guys' calendar. And so it certainly is much appreciated. But those are the next steps as we see it today.
So Commissioner Rodriguez, Chair Rodriguez, do you have a motion you want to put on the floor? And we'll have limited debate so we can move this and maybe get out of here a few minutes early. Yes.
To ensure that since we're in a meeting that it's formality, I move that Chair Donaldson and the hiring committee create a recommendation with the support of the CPC staff, which will incorporate public comments from the chat, if any, and the feedback forms from commissioners within 72 hours to provide our assessment and suitability and qualifications for public safety Inspector General position.
Okay. I'm gonna hope everybody heard that. I don't have to repeat it word for word, but basically the motion will allow the hiring committee led by Commissioner Donaldson to pull together the assessment sheets that have already been distributed at this point by Dr. Anderson. Would take those assessment sheets from each commissioner, also combine that with the public comment that we will glean either from or both from the chat option as well as any email that may be sent in to us. And that report will be completed within 70, how many hours?
72.
72 hours and submitted to the city of Cleveland. Do I have a second to, for that motion?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor with limited debate. Do we have any comments?
I do have a question, if I may. You said there's a deadline of Friday to get these forms into Charles, but then you said 72 hours. When does that 72 hours start? I'm confused.
So I said 72 hours to get our recommendation to the city.
Okay, 'cause I thought there was a Friday deadline to get our comments to Charles. No, where did I thought I saw that in the email.
That was to the city. The Friday, so that was the email that I sent out saying to have responses to
All right,
us.
thank you for that clarification.
So Delonte, you said that our comments need to be to the city by Friday?
So that was initially the request, but admittedly, that was before this conversation about wanting to compile that with the hiring committee and then submitting something to us. So, that being said,
the rationale, so I guess I'll speak. The rationale is because we have to incorporate community feedback as well with a lot of the things that we do. So that's the purpose for the feedback from the commissioners, as well as if there's any input from the community that we feel would be imperative to making a decision.
I do want to add that there are, I don't know if their feedback would be considered valid. There are a number of commissioners that are not on this meeting. I don't know if we should give them time to watch the session. So, and it's actually a little bit close for me to write up feedback for Friday. Is it possible to extend to Monday?
I mean, Monday works for us if that.
So, but that's feedback for you, but then we have to write a separate recommendation as a collective or no?
So Commissioner Donaldson, along with Jason, will be making the final. So we will fill out our feedback forms and then you just send it to Jason. And then all of that will be sent.
And we want to be able to, the commission wants to be able to send comments forward to the mayor's office with the input that we have received from the residents of Cleveland through, who participated or at least heard this interview process. So that we aren't sending all of these documents at various times. We'll send it forward as a package on behalf of the commission that will include public comment and recommendations.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to suggest that we set a deadline for the for our individual comment sheets to be sent in. So it sounds like the city is willing to accept by maybe end of day on Monday, the collective. So should I suggest that our sheets are submitted by the end of tomorrow or Friday?
Well, it's 72 hours before it goes to the city. So I just think we probably need to get them in as soon as possible. I guess we can, Commissioner Rodriguez, what's your preference for, we have a motion on the floor for 72 hours without specifying dates within that, days within that 72 hours as to when they come to CHARS or a staff, and 72 hours to the city of Cleveland. So if we look at 72 hours as a 24-hour day, we have 3 days to complete the process. And I would assume that we're looking at business days. So that would be Thursday, Friday, and by the end of the day, Monday, we would have it to the city.
Whether or not we make the change for the motion, I do think that there needs to be a deadline giving to commissioners so that they know when they need to turn in their form.
Okay, so we can take a vote on this, and then if we want to amend that motion to include the day and time to have it to Commissioner Donaldson and the hiring committee, we can do that as well. So can we take a vote on the motion as given by Commissioner Rodriguez? So all of those in favor? Oh, I need to do a roll call vote. I'm sorry. Commissioner John.
Could you repeat the motion, Chair Ridgway? I'm not
Okay, let's see.
understanding.
Okay, so the motion is that within 72 hours, we will have our recommendations into the city of Cleveland. It will include the recommendations of the commissioners as well as the input from the community that has been forwarded to us through chat or the email. It's a little bit different, but I think is that the intent of your motion, Commissioner Rodriguez?
So the motion, please restate the question.
She wants you to repeat your motion.
Okay, so I guess to say that we will submit a recommendation formally as a CPC by Monday to ensure that we're doing our due diligence to incorporate the community's feedback, if there's any, as well as any commissioner's feedback.
So that was the motion. It's been seconded. That's been discussion. So we will do a roll call vote. Commissioner John Adams.
I'm sorry, I don't, Commissioner Ridgway, I
Yes.
wanted to, I had my hand raised, but I don't think you saw it before.
Oh, I did not. I see it now. I see a hand.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want some clarity. So we are going to individually send the form that was sent to us by the city to the city individually. Is that a part of what we're sending together, or are we sending those separately?
You, as I understand it, a form has already been distributed to each of the commissioners.
Yes.
Each commissioner is to complete that form and send it to the hiring committee led by Commissioner Donaldson. Commissioner Donaldson will take those forms along with the input from the residents who listen to this interview process. He will put all of that together, collate it, and send it as one document to the city of Cleveland.
Okay.
By Monday, end of day Monday.
Okay, so the commissioner feedback is the form that was sent to us by the city, and then that'll just be compiled by the hiring committee.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions before we vote? John Adams, Commissioner John Adams.
Aye.
Commissioner Benito.
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Aye.
Commissioner Early.
I don't think he's
Commissioner
on
Early.
anymore. He left.
I'm sorry.
I believe he left.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Garrett Ferguson. Oh, on mute, she said.
She voted in the chat.
She said she
said aye. I'm sorry, I have to be on mute. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. I didn't hear. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kennedy.
Aye.
Commissioner Van Leer,
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong,
I just want one point of clarification. I'll vote. Commissioner Johnson will be sending our forms. He's just merely compiling them, right? There's no like consensus statement or something, or that all of our individual comments will be given to the city.
well, at this point, the discussion has ended, so we just need to take a vote at this point, please.
Well, I can't because I don't understand the process, so I'm sorry. So I'll abstain, I guess.
Okay. Commissioner Zaid? Commissioner Zaid?
I'm pretty sure she's left.
Okay. And as co-chair, I can also vote, so I vote yes. So we just need a quorum of 7. I think that's 8 yes and 1 abstention. Let me just make sure. No, 9 yes and 1 abstention. So that motion passes. Now, we're going to go back and just repeat this again. So the form that each commissioner has received from Dr. Anderson, we are to fill those forms out individually and send those forms to Commissioner Donaldson, who chairs the hiring committee. He would take your forms along with any input that is being submitted by the residents who shared this process, this interview process. He will collate all of that, working with staff to make sure that we have everything complete. And then we will forward that to the city of Cleveland by the end of the day, Monday. So now going back to Commissioner Wong, you're asking whether we would change any comment that may be coming from the individual commissioners. Is that the intent of your question?
Well, I think I have 2 questions. I think the first one you've already answered, that it seems like the forms are going to be the contents will be upheld, and that he will just compile them and send Mr. Donaldson will send them to the city. Is there any concern that only Mr. Donaldson sees all of the forms? I would be interested into reading the feedback of the community and also of the other commissioners.
I don't think there would be any problem with sharing the document that goes to the city with the full commission. I don't see any problem with that at all. But I think we must trust the people we work with on this commission. And I think Commissioner Donaldson has been very thoughtful in how this process was pulled together, in sharing, being open to receiving comments from all the commissioners who wanted to share comments to make sure that we do this perfectly. I do not believe we need to check his work.
I'm not suggesting at all. I think that was not the right presumption. I'm just interested in because we might have to hire more people, and interested in people's thoughts about about how this interview went. I do also hope it should be important. I don't know if it's possible that the public receive our comments too, or some ability, since this is a public role. I don't know what the existing laws are for this, but I think there has been asked in the questions that there's been interest in this regard.
Thank you. I think that we have been pretty good working with staff to make any reports or documents we have done within the commission available to the public. And I don't anticipate that this would be any different. But we would definitely make sure that the collated document that moves to the city is made available to all the commissioners, and a report or a copy of it made available as a handout, at our next meeting. Is there anything else?
I guess I would ask when Commissioner Donaldson would like to receive the individual feedback forms. Bye.
Is Commissioner Donaldson still on?
Yes, I'm still here. I just asked that everyone send them, as soon as you can. I'm not doing anything to the forms. I'm just compiling them. So it doesn't really, I'm not gonna say it doesn't matter, but me completing the entire document is going to depend on how quickly everyone sends their forms. So long story short, just send it to me as soon as you can. Definitely before end of the day Monday. I would say Monday morning would be a good idea, a good deadline for everyone.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? I want to thank each of you for the time and effort to complete this process. And I know that several of you spent time developing questions that were part of this interview. And so I think it's important to recognize your contributions to this process. And because we're right on time, it's 7:28. We had a 7:30 adjournment. We don't need a motion to adjourn. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, co-chairs.